Hello, everyone. My name is Johannes Ebner. Um, Today, I will be talking about building a Godot add-on. As you can see, this is the peak of my artistic abilities. So everything down here in this presentation will be maximum this good in graphical fidelity. That's because I am really a programmer at heart. But first, in my day job, I work as a senior production partner manager at Xbox. I help bigger partners bring their games to the Xbox platform. And I also work as a freelance gaming solution architect at my own company, Structed.me. My background is really in game development and software development. And I'm a programmer by trade. So I've been working in the games industry for about 20 years in browser games, Unity games, and other backend stuff primarily. I would consider myself now more a C# developer who also embraced GDScript. And over the course of my development career, I have worked always and really enjoyed with the JetBrains IDEs, and particularly Rider for C#, and which is now also available for Godot. So that's really cool. Thank you for making that step into that direction, JetBrains. I also worked as a gaming solution architect at Microsoft, where I worked with the biggest game developers in Europe to build their online services. And this is one of the success stories I've worked on, Valheim, where I helped them replace their backend stack to a true multi-platform backend with Play for Party. We also did a GDC virtual talk there, so you can check this out if you want. In my private practice, I've just recently helped Warhammer 40k Speed Freaks with consulting on their online services in multiplayer. So what qualifies me to talk about Godot add-ons? I am the maintainer of the Premier Playfab SDK for Godot. It is now used by the hit title Domekeeper. So now it's almost 3 years experience in building that. I've dabbled in other things I cannot really talk about right now, but you will see eventually. And I'm the co-host of last year's GodotCon here in Munich. I was responsible for the location, also kind of like getting it here to Munich. Took a lot of care about assembling the team as well. Unfortunately, it's no longer in Munich. I'm not part of the new GodotCon, but that will happen this weekend. So I will be hopefully seeing some of you there. Just say hi to me if you are there. So let's get started. Building a Godot add-on and why every game needs one. So I've seen, can I see a show of hands who has experience with Godot? Oh, yeah, that's not too many. So I give a really quick intro on what Godot is. Most of you probably have heard of Unreal Engine and Unity. I would say Godot is one of the free public contenders in engines right now. It is a completely free and open source engine. It's licensed under the MIT license, and it's gotten a lot of traction since last year's Unity licensing story. Let's put it that way. And development happens really, really fast, and we have a really wholesome community there. And the engine is just so flexible, and it's so fun to work with it. We can talk about this at GodotCon or after this event on these experiences. But one of the biggest perks here is, and it's kind of similar to Unity as well, it's very easily extendable. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. So what's an add-on? It adds on, so you can really build reusable components for your game or for the editor, whether that's assets, like textures, sounds, whatnot, code, whole applications, and other libraries. So there are effectively 4 big types. Oh, that was not supposed to be in here. So there are essentially 3 big ways of doing add-ons for Godot. One of them is plugins. And that's one of the things I will be showing in a little bit more depth today. These are essentially regular code files that you can write with Godot's own scripting language. That is a little bit Python-esque. It's called GDScript. Or if you use C#, you can also do this in C#. You can build editor and gameplay extensions with that. And it's really the easiest form of extending the editor or building reshareable add-ons. And the cool thing about Godot is it has a code editor built in, so you can build everything basically without leaving the editor. Of course, some of us prefer more advanced IDEs like Rider to build the code to build the project, right? So you can do this as well. The next option to build extensions for Godot is modules. That is a direct extension of Godot. This means it essentially lives next to the Godot engine source code. So with that, you can do really everything that you can do with like interfacing with Godot, right? Because even Godot itself uses modules for everything that's not super core. Like the GDScript language that I just talked about is an extension. The FBX model importer is not an extension, is a module to the Godot engine. The biggest downside of that is that if you want to build a module, you need to fully rebuild the editor every time. So this also creates a distribution challenge, because then if you want to ship something, you would need to ship the whole Godot editor, and then it's not particularly easy to get multiple add-ons or modules together. One of the most popular plugins or modules that is out there from the community is Godot Steam. They have historically built this as a module, and because everyone kind of needed Steam anyways, right? So this was kind of like a base editor for many game developers. Yeah, and since you need to do all of these rebuilds and so forth, it creates a distribution challenge, and you really need to host it by yourself and distribute it. And it also creates a support effort in a way. And the third big option used to be GD native, but this has been superseded in Godot 4 or 4.1, is a new system called GDExtension. It is essentially also meant as a replacement in some way for modules, because it does not require you to rebuild the whole editor, but you can still use the whole C++ API of the Godot editor. And for that, the Godot team has provided C++ bindings officially. There are also community bindings for other languages as well. But you really have the full API available to you that you have from other parts, like from the editor or from GDScript available to you. So this basically means you can do everything just like with modules, but the distribution system is much easier and the workflow is much better. There is one thing that is very important to note. As of Godot 4.3, it is always running in tool mode. I'll talk about this in a bit, but it essentially says that your extension can always access everything that is in the Godot editor. And the Godot editor is really an application that is built with Godot itself, right? So if you are then in game execution, in game runtime mode, and you would access editor features, it will crash your game, right? So this is why it always needs to be, you need to put some care into that to work around this. And it's equally easy to distribute as regular plugins, because it uses the same distribution mode, and I'll get to that in the next slide. Distribution of add-ons, whether that's plugins or GDExtension, is usually done via the asset lib. The asset lib is a built-in shop, so to say, within the Godot editor, but it's also available on the website. So there you can just download arbitrary plugins or add-ons built by the community and directly install it in your project, and the Godot editor will assist you with that. Another option would be direct downloads from your GitHub repo, for example, from your website, or also popular is itch.io. All right. That was a screenshot, by the way, from the asset library submission dialog. We will be looking at this in a bit as well, in more depth. So now let's look on how you can create a plugin with GDScript. So let's try doing this live. So we set up Godot. I've prepared a project. You can get the source code for that after the show. I hope we can post this somehow to the video on YouTube, or you can just contact me. I will be having contact details at the end of this presentation. So first, I wanted to show you how it looks. So this is, you can see up there. So ignore this one. Just gonna make it make you ignore it. So this is the Godot editor, right? You have a 2D view, you have a 3D view, and a script view where you can see your code editor. And then we have the asset library. And this is how you can install any plugin that is available on the asset library. You have descriptions and screenshots and possibly videos. You can click download, and we'll download you and guide you through the installation process. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, but we want to do our own plugin. So we click plugins here and click create new plugin. And so you just fill out some basic information like demo. You could give it a subfolder, but it will just take the demo subfolder, put in a description. I'm the author, 0.1 known as the version. We choose language, GDScript. I cannot select C# right now because I don't have the .NET version of the editor. And we need to specify a script name. That is essentially the entry point for the add-on. And we want to activate it now. So I'm just creating this, and here you will see it created. Normally this add-ons folder would not exist. I've prepared a few things. It now created this add-on folder and the demo project in there, and it created two files. One is the plugin CFG, where all the metadata that I've just entered is being stored, and then a demo GD file. There are two main lifecycle functions. That is enter tree that covers all the initialization of your plugin, and an exit tree that is required to clean up. And it's very important to clean up, because if you disable a plugin, everything that you have not cleaned up will stay there. So as I said, I've prepared another plugin. So for the sense of time, I will just disable this and enable the other one. So we'll look in the demo guide here. Here in the plugin CFG, I specified the script to be demo guide. So this is the entry point. Let me quickly close all here, so don't get confused. The demo guide is the entry point, and let's look through this again. So this is specified as add tool. So this means this tells the editor that it is running in a tool in an editor hosted mode. So it is telling the script that it can access all the editor environment, the editor scope. It also needs to extend editor plugin to give it some additional context. And here I have then loaded a scene. And look at this. Yeah, let's see. It just has two buttons. Oh. Not what I wanted. Oh God. Not what I wanted. Okay, trust me, here it is. It's a little bit stupid with, come on, with the mouse pad here. Oh, we have two here there are two buttons, and we preload this. So we have it available at the start of the game. This is a technique that there is no lag when you actually try using this. Then on enter tree, we instantiate the scene, and we add it as a child to the editor interface. So this is basically adding this button up here, and we disable it or make it invisible. And on exit tree, so we mark it for deletion. So this is kind of like a deferred way of removing resources in Godot. So there is no circular dependencies here. We also need to implement has main screen. This basically makes this available here. And we have a get plugin name here that provides the text up here. And then we also specify an icon, and we just load this off of disk. So now that I've enabled this, I have this main menu in here, and I can just I've added a little code that when I click this, I am going to add a tool submenu here. So I can also remove that, or I can add another one. So it doesn't care what you put in there. So I have two now. So suppose I'm unloading this now, just to show you the cleanup stuff. When I'm doing this, you saw it's gotten removed, but this one is still there, right? And that creates a problem, and you need to be very careful about deleting your resources when you add them. Okay, just checking the time. Okay, should be fine here. You can also create your own like lifecycle scripts or little scripts that you can execute as you please. For example, when you have a plugin that you work on, you oftentimes need to reload it, and this is simple code to reload this. Ctrl+Shift+X just reloads the plugin here or executes this particular script that you have selected, and in this case, we are reloading it. Why am I reloading the plugin? That is one of the kind of like issues or gotchas with building in-editor plugins. You cannot debug them. So while Godot has built-in debugger, you cannot debug the Godot editor itself with its own debugger, right? So this is a limitation here. So what I do here is I sometimes use that code, just remove the tool attribute, and then run it in another context as a standalone application, basically, and try out that code, and then I can debug that. Also, one important thing about the tool attribute: if you using other resources like other scripts that have not gotten this tool attribute, then the Godot editor in the editor runtime will consider this an empty script, and you won't see anything, right? So always be aware that within the tool mode, you actually need to declare this attribute. Okay, yeah, that's about it for now. I'm gonna go back to the presentation. So let's recap this real quick. So first, we created a new plugin by specifying the metadata in the settings. This writes then the metadata to the plugin CFG that is then used for the Godot editor and for the asset library when we later upload it to provide you all the details in the UI. Then we have specified this entry pointed script in the plugin CFG, but you can name it any way you want. It doesn't have to be like plugin.gd or whatever. And this entry point needs to have this tool attribute and extends editor plugin. So one thing we talked about is extending the editor. It needs to have the tool attribute, right? So it runs in the editor and has access to the editor scope and does not inherit. So we've already talked about like the debugging and so forth. There are other quirky behaviors because of like this from the back into the Godot editor. So do read documentation. You can click this link when you have the presentation. I'm happy to share that afterwards to look at this. All right. The other use case is to extend the game. So here you need to be, you can just create arbitrary other classes as well. In fact, most of the plugins don't do this tool thing, right? You don't have to do that. You can just create one empty tool script and that's it. And you can ignore it. And then you can just create normal GDScript or C# classes, put them into your add-ons folder and ship this, right? Make regular plain old classes and have users use them. In fact, my own plugin uses mostly just this, right? Because I'm providing functionality for their game and not so much for the editor. And if you do use tool, right, and some of that code is being executed during runtime, you need to check whether you're in the editor or not. And you can do a check whether you're in the editor with this engine is editor hint. That basically tells if that's true, you are in the editor. So a few key takeaways. We don't have debugging for tools. You really need to clean up. You need to also figure out versioning when you do like updates of your plugins, right? So really think about, and really every software developer should do that for every software they make, how you properly version. And then you need to do some manual testing here. Okay, next in line is publishing. So as I've mentioned, there is this asset library. You probably can't see the screenshot, but it's basically the form of the asset library. It's not so important. It's just a boring form. So you go to the website, asset library on the Godot website, sign up. You need to create an account there. Then you can submit a new asset, and you need to basically put in the same metadata as I've talked about. But you also need to specify a repository host. So all the assets that you distribute over the asset library are not actually hosted by the Godot Foundation or by the Godot project. They are hosted by whomever is your repository provider. So in my case, it is GitHub. I host my projects on GitHub. So I say I'm hosting on GitHub. You need to then specify your repo and, of course, your specific commit hash. So basically, the version, the hash of the version that you want to distribute. Because what the asset library in the end does is it provides the Godot editor just a link to the zip archive download essentially of GitHub to download your add-on, and then unpacks that into the add-on folder of the user. When you then submit all that metadata, there will be a manual review, and that's a little bit of a problem because there are not very many people who review add-ons. So it kind of takes some time, specifically for the first submission, and there are no real communications in that process. Even if you get declined, you don't know why, because that's a little bit in its infancy, and the Godot Foundation is currently working on a replacement of that system, so that's why they haven't invested really into this asset library for some time now. I've been told the new store should be there very soon. Let's see, maybe we see some announcement this weekend at GodotCon. So it's always good to find out who does reviews there. Also tell somebody that you're waiting on it, and if they know who you are, right, they can actually contact you via Twitter, whatever, and tell, hey, this and this you need to change in order to be accepted. As I said, essentially, the asset library provides a link to the download a zip file from your GitHub page. This is also why Git attributes are super important. And as we use Git here, Git attributes provides you the ability to kind of like share Git settings. Like in the screenshot, I hope you can see there are a couple of folders and files that I marked with export ignore. So basically, when you click on this export button, it will exclude all of these files, right? Because I don't want my users to have all the junk that I use during development, but I do need it, right? But they don't, and it would just clutter their add-ons directory, or maybe even more, right? Because while you should be only installing stuff into the add-ons directory in your own, you can technically go all over the place and put files into the whole project of the user. Right. Then, because that is kind of cumbersome, because whenever you do an upload to the asset library manually, you need to refill out like the commit hash and whatnot. You should really automate that, and that's why we became software developers. We don't really like to do manual stuff, so let's code it up. In my case, I've done a two-stage release process. I have a prepare stage that kind of calculates the version, updates the version in the plugin CFG that I've showed earlier, and then I'm writing a changelog into a markdown file, and then I commit all of that. This will then create trigger another part of the release process because of the specific commit message, and that will then trigger the release, which does, again, a calculation of the version, tags the release, uploads the artifact to GitHub artifacts, creates a GitHub release, and then submits it to the asset library. I also have in my own ones, obviously, a step for itch.io. And as you can see, I do this with GitHub Actions, or I hope you can see it. And yeah, so I'm also providing this template basically in the repository, so you can use that for your own one. One very crucial one is I just want to highlight that because it's really cool. I struggled a lot with building this my own. Then I found this asset lib GitHub action made by Dennis Plöger. He's called Deep Entertainment on GitHub, and it updates the asset library via HTTP. And there's a little configuration file for that. I also described this in the README of the repo. You just need to change out your icon URL here, and you should be good. So a few key takeaways. First, YAML absolutely sucks. And if you don't hate YAML yet, you will eventually, because it takes an enormous amount of time to understand, to build all of that. And then iterating over it is incredibly painful, because whenever you do changes to your YAML and GitHub Actions, it will take some time for it to process, because you need to first commit, then push, then the GitHub action is triggered, then it runs all of that, and then it fails, and then you're like, oh God, again. And so so if you have a chance to take mine, do it, because you save yourself a lot of lifetime. So yeah, it can be very slow also because of the manual review. So that's what I do, because I want to have like a coordinated announcement when I have my plugin finished or updated. And then I have maybe social media posts, so I wait until this is really reviewed and submitted and approved until I do that, because all the other targets are much faster than the asset library. And if you haven't seen it, you kind of can hack your visibility a little bit, because the latest approved version is always, plugin is always on top on the main screen in Godot. Right? So that's also kind of cool if you want to yeah, orchestrate your releases. All right. Before I go forward, I could take questions now, or should we do it at the end? Is probably better, right? GDExtension is the other part that I wanted to talk about today. And why would you need it in the first place, right? It is really, it has two main use cases. One, is binding external libraries, like external C++ libraries, for example. And the other one is really performance, right? Because you don't have any so many numbers of interaction through like another module that has another scripting language, that has its own garbage collection system and whatnot. And you can also use another language, right? You could use Rust, for example, or SIG. So there's only a couple of things you need for that. You need Godot CPP. This is the binding repository. You can use that as a Git submodule in your repository, and you should really do it like that way. So you can always update when a new Godot version comes around. You need a C++ compiler toolchain. You need Python and pip, because that is a requirement for sconce. Sconce is the build system that that Godot uses. Some like it, some don't, but it's certainly better than make, that's for sure. And you need Godot, at least in the version 4.1. I would recommend you use the latest version. I currently use 4.3 and 4.4 because it adds a couple of new features. So let's quickly look into that as well. So as you can see, there's quite a difference in what Godot sees in terms of directory structure and what's actually there. So Godot has an import mechanism, and it only imports, or it tries importing a lot of files, but you can also exclude those. So for example, all the hidden files are generally excluded, but if I want to exclude a specific folder like this src directory, I can put in a .gdignore file, and it will not try importing any of those. So we have a couple of files here. Ignore the gray ones. I just pre-compiled it, so we don't take take extra time here. So we essentially have the GD example here. You can call it however you want. That's basically your GD extension. You can have as many headers and CPP files as you want, but it does only a few things, right? So first, it defines the class. We call it GD example. It inherits from sprite2d. It has a macro that defines it as a Godot class and sets up a couple of things. So that's built in. We have a time passed here because what we want to do is we kind of like make a sprite that kind of like turns circles, and we always need a bind methods method that we can then use to export some of our own methods into Godot land, and then construct a destructor. And we can use all the lifecycle methods that Godot usually exposes in runtime as well. So processes is basically the update method that you know from Unity. You can also use that in GDScript. So when we go for an implementation, we don't expose our own methods. We just use the process method that's built in, so we don't have to declare anything here. We have the constructor that initializes the time passed variable, and we have in the process, we just get the time passed and give that sprite that we are overriding a new position here. So very simple, very straightforward. And then we have these files registered types header and CPP. That is something boilerplatey. You need to have that. It basically tells Godot or the GD extension system what your initializing function is and the terminator function. So when we look at the implementation, it doesn't do a lot here. We just register our class in the initializer. We have no termination code, and then we have some boilerplate. Basically, this is the entry point that we need to define that registers the initializer, the terminator, and set some values here. I won't go into the depth of it because we won't have time for that. I just wanted to say, when I compile this, I can very easily compile this on the command line here with sconce platform Windows, for example. And since I've already built this, it won't take long, but you can see it is reading a GDScript file. And this GDScript file is in the root here, and it's just a Python program basically to define where the libraries should be going. And that's in the add-ons directory in demo GDExtension, and here in the bin directory. This is where the libraries go. But there is also this .GDExtension file. This is where all the metadata lies. So this is where we tell Godot where our dynamic libraries are that we have compiled and what the entry symbol is here. We specified this example library init, which is defined in register types here, right? So that's done. We also specify what the minimum compatible Godot version is. GDExtension is upwards compatible, basically. So when I build something for Godot 4.1, it will work in Godot 4.3, but not the other way around. I also need to then per platform and per environment specify the libraries. And I can also specify, and this is just for example sake here, I can also specify external third-party library dependencies. Okay, so just a very quick rundown of the code. Now let's look at it in the. I'm gonna delete this because I'm gonna rebuild this. Okay, so in contrast to plugins, we don't need to load it, right? It is automatically loaded from the add-ons directory with the metadata that we've seen. Yeah? So here, demo GDExtension, that's where it is. Okay, so in order to use my GDExtension, here I'm just gonna create a new scene, extension scene. I inherit from 2D scene. Okay, that's cool. Then I go to the 2D view. I just add a new node here. I shall do this with the mouse so you can see how this is. Add child node. And we call it GDExtension, GD example. And so I've just created a new, or imported a new node. This small screen is really annoying. So you can already see in this cross moving around. That's the functionality we added. So here we just use this icon SVG as a texture here, drag it in, and we have that. And so because it's partly off screen, we remove the offset here. And so we can just play this, select the current scene to debug. What's going on? Well, what's going on? Got this now. Yeah, that's really funny. I've been trying this like 100 times. Ah, here we go. There we go. Like the screen is so tiny that I have like this super huge resolution, and so I didn't check this on the screen, to be honest. So yeah, that's why it draws very small. I should have put in some scaling code, but I didn't. But you get the gist of it, right? So let's go back. To the presentation real quick. With 15 more minutes, I need to hurry up a little. Actually, maybe not so much. So, recap, GDExtension. So, it is first the GD example. You can call it whatever you want. This is your extension code. It can access the whole of the Godot API. You have register types, which defines the entry point, the initialization, the terminator. And then we have the metadata file that is called whatever your name is, .GDExtension, and it contains all the metadata for loading in the editor. And it kind of like, it doesn't define, kind of nomed this, but it hints at the entry point, the minimum Godot version, whether it's reloadable, hot reloadable basically, and extra library paths and dependencies. Compiling, you can do, as you can see, with sconce and then the platform. It just builds the binaries and drops them in the add-on there. You can also build multiple at the same time. And you can also, you do this with the sconstruct build script. And if you want to do debugging, you need to build the editor or build the libraries with def build yes and debug symbols yet. So it will add debug symbols to your libraries. Two things I wanted to call out for the new 4.4 version of GDExtension or Godot. It will allow you to expose runtime methods. So basically, right now, because everything works in tool mode, you constantly have to check whether you are in the editor or not, right? So you don't accidentally call into the editor runtime while you're in your game space, so to say, and then the game would be crashing because it couldn't find like the node tree of the editor. So this will be exposed in the new GDExtension 4.4. And it can also declare virtual methods that your users will then need to implement. So a couple of takeaways. You have the full access to the Godot API, including lifecycle methods like process. You should not ever use Visual Studio Preview as your compiler toolchain because it hides itself a little. So sconce will never detect the compiler toolchain. So if you're using the Visual Studio toolchain or compiler toolchain, you should use the generally available one. You can create docs that you can then view in the editor, or your users can. You can create XML stub files that you can then fill with your documentation and include in the build process to output with your binaries. And as I said, you can do debugging. I haven't checked this out, but I've also linked an article on how to make the debugging integrate with Rider. You can find this at this link. Then there's a couple of people I want to thanks at the end. Dennis Blüger again for the AssetLib action. BitBrain, he's kind of a famous guy in the Godot space, who helped me a lot with GitHub Actions. Enrico Barbieri Cavallini for his support on GDExtension. I'm actually working on a GDExtension with him right now. And Patrick Exner, Paddy Exe, for all the documentation work on GDExtension. And of course, all the maintainers of Godot. Massive thanks to them. Here are a couple of links, including some demos, my workflow examples, and so forth. You can view this afterwards. And yeah, that's it. We have a couple more minutes for questions. Feel free to contact me whenever you like. I'm a pretty open person. If you see me somewhere on an event, I'm on many events, just talk me up. Don't be shy.